What is the opposite of hope? Or maybe the better question yet is, why we hope? My name is Joshua Green Thompson, and I'm 17 years old from Johannesburg, South Africa. So, back to what I was saying about hope. What is the opposite of hope? Well, to me, the opposite of hope is depression. But why should we care? Why should you care more specifically? You should care because 1 in 4 young people have thought about taking their own lives. That's 1 out of every 4 young people you know. This is called hopelessness. A lack of hope to the point that we can't even see ourselves getting through another day, and it's actually listed as a medical symptom of depression. And we are interacting with these people, experiencing such hopelessness on a daily basis. Why we hope and what is hope? Last year I went through a depression. I got so low to the point where I couldn't see myself getting through another day. Actually, I didn't want to. I didn't want to live my life anymore. And here's where we see the role that hope plays in our lives, because hope would get me up in the morning, but when I was depressed, I just couldn't move from my bed because I couldn't see the point. There was no hope. Hope would get me through a long school day, but when I was depressed, I couldn't get through it without having a mental breakdown of some sort. And this is what hope is. It's that tiny voice or feeling in the back of your head that keeps you going and keeps you from falling, even when you think you might. Picture hope as your harness when you're climbing. It allows you to go up and down without falling and hurting yourself. But when you're depressed, this harness is weakened and you will fall and hurt yourself. You know somebody who's falling every day. You eat dinner with them. You go to school with them. You work with them. You live with them. You interact every day with somebody who's falling into that dark abyss of hopelessness. This is why depression and mental illness are issues to be taken seriously. The sad truth is that more than often we think that they don't affect us and take them for granted. We have to stop believing that it won't happen to us, or at least affect us in one way or the other. The stigma that is attached to mental illness has to be eradicated. We have to remember that these people who are suffering are our family, our friends, our colleagues, and stigmatizing the problem won't do anything to resolve it. Unfortunately, we have a long way to go. Mental health is often referred to as the orphan of the healthcare system and is severely underfunded the world over, especially here in Southern Africa. In my home country of South Africa, we have a population of around 60 million people. Of that population, a staggering 43% have experienced mental illness. That's around 25 million people. And of that 25 million, only 20% will receive any sort of help. That's 5 million out of a population of 60 million. People think that depression and mental illness are things that are very separated from their lives, but when in fact they actually impact us on a daily basis. I have a friend who was severely depressed, and he came to me one day in confidence and told me that he was feeling depressed. I didn't really take him seriously, and I told him that he was just being dramatic, that he's not actually depressed, that he's all imagining it. A few weeks later, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And a week or 2 after he told me that, I also started going through my own depression. And I realized how hard it was for him to tell me what he was going through. I gave him an account of what he was feeling. I told him that his pain wasn't real, and I believed what I said until I actually felt the same pain. I gave him an account of what he was feeling. I gave him my idea of what he was going through. And when I got the courage to finally tell somebody, I got a similar response, and it made me feel awful. One thing that this taught me is that we will never truly understand what somebody else has gone through because we all have different experiences of things. My experience to something will be completely different to the next person. We have to choose to put ourselves in the position of these people, or at least try and understand it. But that doesn't mean that we have to go out and get depressed every time our friend gets depressed. No, that's not what I'm saying. That'd be very unhealthy. What I'm saying is that we just have to imagine what they're going through. Because when we do this, we become more empathic towards the people in our lives who are going through a tough time. And then we can address the problem from there. When we do this, we're more open-minded, more compassionate, and less ignorant. We think that this is something so far off from our reality, but take the example of my friend and how oblivious I was to his struggles until it got to a point where he couldn't cope anymore. He was somebody I saw on a daily basis, and I had no idea. People seem to have these outlandish ideas about mental illness and depression, that it's a white disease or middle-class disease. Let's set the record straight. Anybody can get depressed. Depression does not discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're white, black, poor, rich, or Asian. Every single one of us can get depressed. And we have to work to get rid of these outrageous stereotypes that exist today. So why do we still act like it doesn't affect us or that it's not important? Well, my theory is that you can't see it. When somebody falls and breaks their legs, we can actually see their physical pain. We can hear them screaming in agony. We can see their pain. We can't see what's going on in somebody's head. We can't see emotional turmoil. We can see their sullen faces, but other than that, we have no idea what they're going through. It's like people only see mental illness as a problem when it becomes a physical problem. I remember I only saw a psychiatrist after my depression transgressed into physical symptoms. And what do we have to do now to overcome these prejudices? It starts with realizing one simple fact. Depression and mental illness are an illness like any other. Just like how flu, bronchitis, and pneumonia are all illnesses. You can't make a choice to be mentally ill. Just like how you can't make a choice to have flu, bronchitis, or pneumonia. So why was I depressed? To this day, I can't give you a good answer to that question, and quite frankly, I don't know. It didn't make sense to me as to why I was depressed because I have no reason to be, and that goes back to me saying that anybody can get depressed. It doesn't discriminate. I have no reason to be depressed. I have always been a happy person with many loving friends and family, and my family has no prior history of any serious mental illness. So it was a scary thing when it happened to me because I didn't know what was going on, and I would often tell myself time and time again, I have no reason to feel this way. And I would ignore these feelings and hide them from people and hide them from myself. I would feel, it felt illogical to me. And that's the feeling depression gives you. It's an illogical one that you can't explain with words because you just feel too awful. I remember how hard it was to tell my own parents about what I was going through. And there were times that I tried my absolute best not to say a single word to them or anybody else in my house. Because I felt like if I said something, I'd have a complete meltdown and start crying. And it did happen a number of times. This is proof that we should take someone's word, even if they can't articulate it in the way that they'd be able to explain their physical pain. Even if they can't explain how or why they're feeling that way, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we still have to listen and be kind. Because trust me, explaining depression is so hard. I know. Stigma thrives in an environment of doubt and ignorance, and doubting is the reason why so many of our bright young minds are suppressed and made to feel worthless. When we do this, the world loses out on the magic of their capacity. I urge you to believe us when we cry. Take our word when we feel hopeless. Please be kind, because it does go a long way. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression and began seeing a psychologist. It helped for a while, but then my depression started developing into physical symptoms, like I said. I started having random dizzy spells, blackouts, insomnia, and severe headaches that would usually last the whole day. At this point, I told my parents I needed to see a psychiatrist. I started seeing a psychiatrist and went on a steady course of medication. I attended regular therapy sessions the whole of November. And I got progressively better. School opened again in January this year, but by early February, I started getting depressed again. I can easily say I hit rock bottom at this point, and I was taken out of school to go to a psychiatric hospital for 2 weeks. I was lucky to have the support of my parents, but a lot of my peers don't have the same support with their own individual battles with mental illnesses. But remember one thing, you don't have to have gone what I've gone through to have a problem that should be taken seriously. No, not at all. You don't have to be checked into a psychiatric ward or any hospital for that matter. Your problem should be taken seriously. Seek help, find help again. These were the worst few months of my life, and if I learned anything from my journey is that we should always have hope. Nobody is a hopeless case, and if we start to believe something like that for even 1 second, we're as good as dead. There's always that harness of hope that keeps us from plummeting to our death. The moment we start to believe that there's no hope, we've given up on living our lives. You're never as low as you think. There's always something you can do to restore that hope in your life. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what I'm hoping to leave you with today. The strength to be hopeful at any time in your life. I know it might feel like that light at the end of that long, long tunnel is not there. But trust me, it is. Maybe dim, and you might not be able to see it, but it's always there. You should always push forward to find it. Thank you.